I'm like, medicine has flavor. People take their medicine when it tastes good. Look at all these products from drugstore that anyone can buy. Like, this is a ridiculous conversation. And that was the first hurdle we overcame. But that was a crazy stunt that we had to do to like just common sense.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of The Dime. I'm Brian Fields, and with me, as always, is Kellen Finney. And this week, we got a very special guest, Wendy Bronfein, co-founder of Curio Wellness. Wendy, thanks for taking time. How are you doing today?
Hello. Thanks for having me, guys. I'm well.
Excited to dive in. Kellen, how are you doing?
I'm doing real well. Excited to talk to Wendy. I'm excited to dive into Maryland and East Coast cannabis. How are you doing, Brian?
Yeah, I'm stoked. I'm really excited to talk to Wendy learn about Curio as a alumni of Days of Maryland, getting the chance to kind of pick Wendy's brain about the status of Maryland market, but more about what's going on there. It's really beneficial because, as we were talking about before we started, the state of Maryland has changed drastically since my old ass has left there. So I'm excited to learn. So Wendy, we got a East Coast, West Coast battle. And put yourself on the map. What side you taking?
I've lived in both. In the world of cannabis, I think I'm taking East.
There it is, Kellen. There it is.
I mean, I wasn't even going to try after.
No, we're just gonna. You just
10 minutes of bonding on
get right past it. But the record needs to be reflected. The record is now reflected. Cool. So, Wendy, for our listeners unfamiliar about you, can you give a little background about yourself and how you found your way to the cannabis space?
Sure. So I am born and raised here in Baltimore. I actually was in the television industry. That was my major. That was what I did from the time I was out of college until 2016, when I left and I returned here to start a business with my dad. We had won a license when Maryland went medical, and it was not really any plan to go there. We sort of found our way when Maryland had stated they were going to have a medical program. There was talk about an application process. We had gone, my mom, dad, sister, and me, with some family friends to Colorado, Memorial Day weekend of 2014, I think it was. And that was right around the time that adult use had happened. And so we'd gone to dispensary and seen some stuff. And I came home, and then the decision was made. I was going to go back to Colorado the next month for the NCIA convention and like do due diligence and come back. And so I did that. And then we actually, sat around the kitchen table. I had my little notebook. I told them all this stuff. Sometimes I laugh in my head because I went into this like policy thing there, and they talked about how the states are going to hit a critical mass. And then the federal government is just looking for the states to like test it all out and prove it and do it for them. And then it's all going to change. And 10 years later, here we are. But we do have more states, so that's a win. So then we ended up winning pre-approval, in that process finally completed in August of 2016, started building our facility here in Maryland. We were operational in 2017. We actually were the first company to ship to licensed dispensaries in December of that year, and have been in the space ever since. The state did go adult use with medical in July of last year.
I love it. So let's talk about those early days. So, right, you're applying for the license. Is there a consideration from you at that time, Wendy? It's like, hey, this is something that can work out for myself, or you're more of like back of the mind, like, hey, unlikely we're going to win, unlikely we're going to get approved. So, like, what's the thought process internally from you on that side?
So we were nights and weekends from like 2014 until we heard. I mean, at a certain point, the Maryland application went in November of 2015, and it had said that they were going to let you know by the end of the year. And then the new year came, and then it was like March, and then it kept going like that. And so there were some things we were doing with visiting sites and things like that of other operators in that time while we waited. But in that time before and doing the application was a heavy amount of due diligence with scientists and physicians and experts, like both in this country and outside the country, and then building up a core team for the start of the organization, and all of like essentially the education that we gave ourselves that we didn't have before.
Which is like a full grasp of immigration, right? And Maryland itself, from a medical standpoint, is that vertically integrated or not?
No, wholesale. So we had one at that time, a license to cultivate, to process, and a dispensary, but you also could distribute any of the products that you grow or process to any dispensary in the state. And it still is that way.
So in those early days, did you have to go out and like form your supply chain distribution, like pre-cultivation? And then like, was this the first time you guys had ever cultivated? Like, what was that whole process like? Like, right before the thing kicked off? Because like, did you have to have inventory like ready for like the first day of sales? Like, how did that work?
Well, the whole thing was behind schedule. So we actually it was so behind that they had opened up the patient registry, and I think we had like 20,000 patients signed up, like before we could even get something to a store and a store could sell anything. So everyone was like chomping at the bit when it finally launched. But yet we had sort of developed everything. And honestly, the way that some of the licensing process goes now has sort of learnings of the past. So back then it was like, not only was it your whole plan and all of the ways that you were going to secure and grow and process and everything you were going to do and the brand you were going to build. I mean, we had built out an entire brand in advance because we didn't know some states you had to show that stuff. What's your website going to look like? So we had like done all that work before we even started. We had identified the real estate. So as soon as we won, it went into like, let's demo the interior of this building and start building out our grow facility, which at the time building itself was about 60,000 square feet. And it had our grow, our process, and our offices there when we started. And so we built out the space, but we only turned on so many rooms in the beginning and grew off of that. And then we were the licensee for Dixie Brands in Maryland. So first thing we did was started to make their products. We were making their elixirs and tablets and topicals. And so that's what we distributed in the beginning, the flower and the Dixie products to those. I think there was initially 7 dispensaries that opened that first week of December. And then as we got into the new year, there was more cultivators and processors that turned on. There were more dispensaries. It probably was like a whole nother year later until there was really a critical mass. And then we were sort of in a steady state through medical. And then we changed over to adult use. But to your point, there was cultivators on our original team, like in our application. They knew how to grow stuff, but no, we did not.
Did it feel like drinking from like a fire hose with just all the decisions you're making at the same time?
Oh, yeah. That phrase is said in this building a lot, drinking from a fire hose.
Because just like having you like outline like, okay, we've got this to do with this to do, this to do. And there's not like there's like a roadmap or a playbook, right? It's like there's a fire here, there's a fire here, there's a fire here. Like neither of them have easy decisions.
Well, our COO at that time was masterful at the planning of like every little thing we had to do. We actually had a countdown clock in our office, like a digital clock that was like set to whatever the back out of the inspection was. And it was like rolling down every day. And honestly, we got to a point where we actually did get inspected. Like the building was done ready. It was inspected. And then we waited, I think over a month or a bit over a month for the state to have a meeting to say, okay, we're going to award dispensaries who have been inspected. So we just sat around. I mean, one time we actually all just went bowling because there's a bowling alley nearby. And it was like, it was a time where there would always be this thing, well, I think there's going to be a meeting this week. Oh, I think and it's like, it would never happen. So we just kept doing stuff. But sometimes it was like, we can't do anything here.
What was the biggest early hurdle, biggest challenge that like looking back, you're like, that one was really the biggest pain in the neck?
Well, I mean, I think the overarching is like not knowing what you didn't know. Right. And then like, as you learn along the way, I think maybe I was doing a tour recently and I was like in the trim room and back then it was like literally all hands on deck. Like it didn't matter if you were like me who was like marketing or the cultivator, or you were the guy who was meant to do processing. We were all in the trim room because like everyone was doing it and we'd stay late and we'd all be in there. And so when I think about like the pathway to trimming product now to get to market versus like the carts that we rolled in from the dry cure to the trim room, then took the big thing off it, then broke down the plan on our like individual table. The mess in the room was insane. So the cleanup, like after you finish the strain was crazy. Like today, we have, like something like a Mobius where you're getting like what I would call like a pre-trim, right? It's getting off a lot of that heavy material at the beginning so that your manicure is easier. We were doing all of the original stuff, like every stem, every like leaf. We definitely will look back and we're like, wow, we didn't know a lot. We made such a mess and took way too much time. And we also didn't know then, realize the element of the lab. Like we did it all. And then we were like, wait, they're going to send us a CFA. So then we can't really put a sticker on it yet because we don't have anything. So we only did half the work at this time. So we have to we shouldn't really go to the packaging and the trimming part for that finishing until the C of A has come in so that it's just one unit of work instead of starting and stopping. So we had a lot of learnings.
Are you a pretty fast trimmer?
I have not been timed in a very long time, but it is an activity that I find it very relaxing. I am a detail-oriented person, so that like sort of anal activity is enjoyable to me.
Those stories like you're talking about are like some of the favorite ones for us to hear, because I think sometimes people from the outside completely forget, like you got your license, it's amazing. And then internally, like there's no roadmap. There's no like detailed Google. You're not like, hey, how do we do this? Everything has to either be learned through trial by fire or it has to be improved, like slow increment stuff. And those are the aspects that are kind of most enjoyable, exactly like you detailed.
Yeah, I mean, that we became a franchisor for our retail part of the business so many years ago. And the reason that we went through that exercise was as states were continually talking about expanding licenses and opportunities to participate, we, in the wholesale market, as the person who grew and processed and sold to dispensaries and then operated our own dispensary. And so we were able to see like the clip at which people could become successful running it versus not, or anywhere on that spectrum. And then the impacts of 280 and all these things to your business. We were like, if we take this model that we have, that we felt we had done a successful job of making it of a viable business, we could improve other people's ability of entrepreneurially getting up and running and succeeding faster and not having to figure it all out. Because sometimes even back then, right, it was also when the state was starting. So like if you join at a later date, regs and nuances are more filled out. I was actually just telling a story in a meeting earlier today. This is probably a good one for you. There was a moment early in the program when we were medical where the regulator wanted to say that nothing could have flavor. And everyone was like totally up in arms, right? And we didn't even have edibles at this point, right? But it was just like we had the Dixie elixirs had some flavor, and the tablets that dissolved your mouth had some flavors, but there were other things out there. But the idea of it, the edibles were expected to come, so they were like freaking out. So they had this meeting, and I went to CVS and bought like every single over-the-counter medicine that came in a chewable, a dissolvable. I found adult liquid Tylenol, Theraflu, like everything you could get. I spent like $300 on all this medicine and got to the meeting and I got called up. I got carded at the CVS because they probably thought I was trying to make meth with all the medicine I was buying. But seriously, I was like so embarrassed, but I'm like, there's a real reason. And so then I get up to talk and I take this stuff out and I cover the whole table in it. And I'm like, medicine has flavor. People take their medicine when it tastes good. Look at all these products from drugstore that anyone can buy. Like, this is a ridiculous conversation. And that was the first hurdle we overcame. But that was a crazy stunt that we had to do to like, just common sense.
I can only imagine the person behind the counter being like, ma'am, you don't look sick and you're buying an enormous amount of medicine. Like,
for like every condition possible.
Do you need to call someone?
And I got, when I was there, I just remember being like, well, I already have cherry. What's this one? Okay, this one's tropical. All right, grape. Like I had to show like how many versions of whatever could I find.
So I guess take us through the concept, right? Maryland was a medical market and then switched to adult use. And the way I understand it was that medical operators were given the ability to go first. Is that how you were able to convert? Is that correct?
Yeah. So when they passed, we passed by a referendum in an election, and then the following session, legislative session, they wrote the law. So coming out of the session, which was in April, we knew that following July 1 was going to be the turn on date. And so then it was this sort of swift action to give us a standard of emergency regs, so that everyone who was doing medical could convert and opt into also selling adult use. We all had to pay a very, very large fee to shift our business model that was outsized from probably most or any state in the country to date. And then, but turned it on July 1, and didn't have any discrepancies between dispensaries. It was just like the dispensary now serves both. You either needed to identify that you were going to have medical only hours, or you were going to prioritize them in the queue. That was one of the distinctions. Maryland doesn't pay tax for medical. You do pay a 9% tax for adult use. And then medical patients could buy potencies above 10 milligrams per piece or 100 milligrams per package. adult use cannot. So that was sort of the three primary pieces. And then we started to sell. And then the new rounds of licenses that they were adding that were contemplated in the bill came through a lottery. So there were terms of a lottery that were set up, and the first winners were announced in March of this year, and a second batch were announced, I think it was in June. And then because like that was what I was saying before, where how they do it so much differently now. So then once you were selected in a lottery, then I think they had these like validating conversations with people who were drawn to confirm that everything that your license and like everything for your application that's required is there. And then they move you into a conditional phase. And so then now all those players have 18 months to become operational. And the way that it's communicated by the state is that if you don't make that date, then the license folds back into the state.
Were you able to, did you have to differentiate supply chains?
No.
For medical, so that you could have the same supply chain all the way up to when it was the consumer had to make the decision if it was a medical consumer or recreational consumer?
Yeah. So as a dispensary, you would take in the inventory. So you would take in the high and low potencies. We use Dutchie or whatever you're using, would designate, if you're shopping, you can only see it A menu versus B menu, right? But it all comes down to the person who walks into shop.
Yeah. Okay. That makes it so much easier.
It is much easier. Yeah.
It would have been crazy to have two cultivations next to each other and be like, this plant right here is a medical plant.
Well, up front, we did a lot of pushback there because we were like, we can't have like, this if it's 27% THC, it's AU, but if it's 28 and above, it's like that's just crazy. So flower and vape are agnostic of that 10 milligram thing, and we didn't want to have all those metric tags, right? Like how are you're gonna? It's just one system. It's much cleaner.
What is like the internal planning process, knowing your team is getting ready for adult use? Is it like, how fast can we go? Or is it like, we think we're going to try to take this percentage market? What's the internal conversation like?
So we had done a lot of modeling. We had looked at states that had gone through this path before, and sort of those that were more prolific and those that were not. We thought that Illinois was a pretty good proxy and a good sort of like target because they had done it well. And actually ultimately their medical program saw some growth after the changeover. And so we used that to model out what we thought the growth was going to look like in Maryland. And we did a really nice job. I mean, we're pretty much on the mark, which is interesting because there were consultants that the state had hired in the legislative session to present what the change looked like. And the numbers that they shared were just bananas. I mean, when we saw the report, we took it internally and our team was like working through the numbers, and someone came back and said, the volume that they're saying would mean that every adult in Maryland would smoke like a joint a day, every day of the month. And I'm like, that's just insane. That's like not happening, nor is every single adult interested in participating. But all that data is what like helped them define how to draft an updated program, which was obviously somewhat flawed.
Bet you that market looked like it was going to really.
Oh, it's a hockey stick. It went crazy. It was like every year it'll just be more. Yeah, no. And honestly, it's really not been a lot more. It's been a little bit more than 2x. I mean, people talked about 3. It's not gotten close to that. And the other thing is the dynamics of what the market was changed when we went adult use. So the advertising abilities that we had when we were medical were have been very much constrained. And so I don't think that there is the awareness level in general. So you're not seeing the same volume of sales that would have been predicted. And thus the state doesn't see this realm of the tax revenue. We also entered the Missouri market earlier this year in the spring. And it's interesting because we're sort of a parallel path. They started February, we started July. We have about the same amount of adults that are 21 and older in the state, between the two states. We skew a little bit higher median income. Their market is far and away stronger than ours. And we attribute that to sort of 2 key pieces. 1, they can advertise. And 2, they have a universal product mix. So
what do you mean by that?
So it's not necessarily common. They don't have a cap. What happens is if you buy because you're medical, there is tax, but that tax is lower than if you buy because you're adult use. But I could buy 5 milligrams, I could buy 50 milligrams, right? And so I think collectively that has made it a stronger market. It doesn't mean that people abuse how they use it. It's just, I think, more effective in its execution. And of course, we talk internally where we're like, well, what's the point? I mean, like I can buy a 10 count of 10 chews. I can buy up to 7 of them when I come in here today. I can come back tomorrow. Technically, you're not tracking me. Whether I'm supposed to possess that much or not is the different story. But I could walk in day after day and buy that much in different stores. And now I could go home and eat as many as I want. So, what's the difference?
Games.
You're not
like
really, you can't control what somebody's going to do. And the truth is I think, it all just then that lumps into the myths and the stereotypes. And we did a lot of research this past year about understanding the consumers. And I think a lot of people do not really understand who is the cannabis consumer or who they are in general. Like, I think they make assumptions about sort of one type of consumer, and that drives product mix. It drives price compression. It drives a lot of like the deal behavior, and it's much more dynamic.
Can you give like the demographics of the person you're alluding to?
Well, I mean, I think the classic, like what people would think is like somebody like a enthusiast of just of cannabis in general. Like you just want a heavy smoker, maybe uses other things, but driven by flower is a part of the market. And they're a consistent consumer, but they're not loyal to much, and they're driven by price, and they're driven by THC. And there's other groups out there that can tell a better story and can build a better relationship with a dispensary and or with a brand. Yeah.
Is there a part of the market that you think is underserved, and given like your marketing background that you're looking to attack or to attract into kind of Curio's brand portfolio?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to tell my secrets, but I would say there's
just
60,
the 3 of us.
I know. I think there's 64% of the market that is not the group that I just described.
Sure. Is that individual that we're referring to, is they fall into an age group, or do you think it's more wider than that?
The 64% or the cliche that everyone
the 64%.
thinks. 64%. Oh, no. That's that. There's multiple groups in there and amongst ages. But in general, I also think we know from data from states like Colorado of where teen use has not increased and things like that. It's not really a young person's game, so to speak. I think that there are people who are in the space from 21 and above, but I think it's really much more 30s and up. And it's a lot more people who are either, AKA the California sober, right? It's like, you're not drinking. This is how you want to relax or unwind or have fun or whatever it is. And then it's just like life, right? It's just something of mood and sleep and stuff hurts and whatever it is. And like, since we've gone to adult use, the people come in and ask for the exact same stuff. I mean, barring an unfortunate diagnosis with something chronic or terminal, the list of requests is all the same. It's all the same kind of like, I'm aging, life changes, I need something. Take the edge off, make me feel better, whatever it is.
Help me sleep.
Right. It's all the same stuff.
Are you exploring some of these like concepts via marketing in Missouri? And how has that been? Has it been like opening experience because you haven't had those tools in Maryland? So
we're doing it both Maryland and Missouri. Yes, we can execute it more broadly.
But what's the freedom there in Missouri that you mentioned, right?
Yeah. So Missouri, we can sort of publicly display ourselves anywhere. There's no constraint on like whether it's a billboard or a table set up at a festival or a farmer's market or whatever it is. Like you can just physically be. In Maryland, there is a part of the regulations and the law, which is part of what makes it more stringent, that there's probably like 10 synonyms for a sign that are listed that says like you cannot, right? And so the only way that you're used that in a sort of broad sense you could publicly do it is if it's the property, right, where you own or lease, right, your storefront or whatever. Otherwise, it's if you were sponsoring something and you can quantify that the audience mix is 85% or more 21 and older, then it's valid. And there's a few different ways that they've identified that you can do that, but it's very constraining. That same audience percentage is required if you do digital, which you can do here and there, or anything print, anything that would be like a traditional media form. But really, it's this overarching thesaurus of billboard or sign terms that has really sort of quieted our presence. And to be honest, for the 7 years that we had medical, it wasn't a problem and it wasn't offensive. It was quite tasteful. We had appropriate regulations and no one really colored outside the line. So I think it's striking because they are adding so many licenses, and it feels like a very arduous constraint if you are entering this place where it's hard to get capital, it's hard to have banking, you have 280E that sucks up all your profits, and now you're entering a market that's already active and you can't tell anybody you're here. Like, that doesn't make any sense. So I think we're yeah, right. So I think we're hopeful that, it'll change. But Missouri, on the flip side, has sort of just general parameters of appropriate behavior, I would call it. And then you can use all traditional forms of marketing and advertising.
The most crazy,
including sampling.
As you should be able to, though, right? Like, these are like the basics of just acting like a normal organization trying to grow your business. You're not asking for special treatment. You're just asking to be like same as everybody else. Yeah,
it's a constant like oxymoronic situation of like, well, we've decided we're legal, but we're not going to act like we're comfortable with the fact that we're legal.
We're still going to be awkward about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. We're not ready to be out yet. Like, we're just still like, we're not sure. So I guess then the concept of trying to grow your brand and try to build that awareness, like we're talking about in these constraints, does that start with an idea and then try to work through the creativity and be like, we can't do this, so we have to kind of fit between this? Or do you say, you know what, let's not even try?
Well, I'll best answer that question through right now versus first time around. It's because we're actually working on a rebrand design right now. So one of the places that really shows up is packaging, because everybody has their own rules. And so what we did was we built a multi-state matrix of regulations and gave it to our agency and said, we want you to propose to us packaging designs under this like new look and feel that can be compliant with minimal. Like, we know we're going to have to change a symbol. We know we're going to have to change a warning statement. But for that, like, how minimal can we be if we have to iterate this across multiple states? And we had the first round of review and they were like on like, it was like 3 concepts. They only on concept 1. And I was like, at a certain point, I just like stopped. I'm like, this is, we're not doing this. This is like, I do not like this one. We're not going forward. Whatever. And we like moved on more quickly. But then they said like, this is what would work if we made it work for everything. I was like, oh, okay, that might be a bridge too far. Let's dial it back a little bit. And so we basically then gave the feedback of what we like, what we want to achieve. But when you show us the next thing, give us the visibility of like, look, this is going to work 80% of the time. It's going to work 40% of the time. And if it doesn't work, this is what you're going to have to change. So we had a really great round the next time where they showed us updates, and then they took like sort of the biggest offenders of change statewise and started with the master version and then took it all the way down to the state that says you can only be black and white. And so that way we knew that it would be cohesive and we understood what the layers of the look we were going to lose. And the funny thing is like, it's not like these packages had major claims or anything particularly kind of extra on them. It was just more like, they're an attractive, compelling design. There is a hierarchy of message. I have everything on there I need to say. And it's visually appealing to an adult. And yet it still had to go like from here to like there. But it's made it much better. And it's much more, like, it's like soothing in a way to know that, if we have to shift it anywhere, like, you're not feeling like it's been destroyed. Because when we were doing it to go into Missouri, because there's the negative of Missouri. The advertising is fantastic. Missouri and Maryland are the inverse of each other. The packaging is a nightmare, particularly from a branding perspective, because you're down to 1 color, up to 2 logos, Otherwise, text is black or white, just to say a product name. And the word marijuana huge, the symbol, and the compliance label. Like
What
we even
color?
had a package where the package had, you know how like a prescription bottle, like in Boston, it'll say like push down turn, right? So it was like a CR bag, and it had like an IKEA style picture that's like, if you can figure it out, good luck, of like how to work the CR bag. And they were like, take it off. And I went back to the team and I was like, isn't this on the bag that we buy? And they're like, no, it's actually a file that they give us to like add. And I'm like, okay, well, we have to take it off. So there was just like really lame. I mean, the first time we submitted a pouch that had gummies in it, we had designed it where it said our logo, the word choose, because that's what we call gummies, and then like the flavor and the potency, like black cherry vanilla, 10 milligrams. And they rejected it, and they told us that it would be approved if we flipped it, which basically made it read like a sentence. Curio, black cherry vanilla choose, 10 milligrams, black cherry vanilla, 10 milligram choose. Like, so the artfulness of the design, which was limited because we couldn't do much, was not even accepted. It had to be like literal of how you would read it. And I was like, this is not going to be good.
Do you ever dream of doing the designs when, let's say, the regulations are more sensible?
Well, Maryland is like, that's like, it's fine. We can't like say we're going to cure anything, but we wouldn't do that anyway. But we can be much more, it can have personality and be visually appealing, just like, something in a cosmetics aisle would.
Talk to us about some of the research. I know that's an area your team has moved toward, and I know that there's some areas you're really bullish on.
Yeah. So we've done a lot of product innovation. We continue to do that. We've really wanted to try and, knowing that people often come in, right? It's like, I can't sleep, this hurts, whatever is going on. We wanted to sort of be able to take, and we feel like part of the legitimacy of this is to be able to put product to person that is more definitive, not like, I take 5 milligrams, you take 5 milligrams. I got rid of my migraine, your back doesn't hurt, and your mood's better. Like, but that's not how, like, back to my whole like CVS day, like, that's not how we buy stuff, right? It is like Pepto is because your stomach hurts and Excedrin is because you have a headache. You don't take, it doesn't work the other way. So we have a scientific advisory board that's been with us since the beginning. They actually just met last week, and we've worked with them to develop things where it's like, this is what we're trying to figure out that we want to help someone deal with. These are cannabinoids, terpenes, constituents of the plant we could work with. Can they address the problem? How do we build a formula that does that? And how do we deliver it? And so it started with a sleep product that we developed, and we worked with a company called ResMed that has a tool called Sleep Score that like allows you to, you can download the app and evaluate your sleep. But they also have a bedside unit that's more stringent. And so we made this tablet that is a ratio between THC and CBN, but it has what's called a pulsatile 2-pulse system. So when you take it 30 minutes before bed, and the first pulse of the dose comes to you to help you fall asleep. And 3 hours later, a second pulse comes through that helps you stay asleep. And the pill is scored, so you can break it in half if you want less potency of the cannabinoids, but you still retain the same dosing mechanism. And so it was developed actually because my mom and the head of our SAB's wife both had issues sleeping. And it was sort of like can we break the Ambien habit pill? And then that led to it's what I would call like a sister product that's more daytime, that's CBD, THC, and THCV that you don't ever, in my experience, I can't speak for everyone, but you don't really feel high in any way. I've never had that moment where you're like, oh, here, like it just turned on. I feel like, none of that happens. But you have a much more like ease of being, a little bit of a mood and energy lift. And just sort of nice, like a very positive, take the edge off, if you will, highly functional. And then the third, these are all like the much more like clinically things we've done, is something for GI, and a version of that, actually more than one version of that, is going into a formal placebo-controlled trial right now. And so when we went into AU, the state of Maryland did codify terms around doing academic research, and specifically placebo, which we had pushed for because when we did that trial with the sleep product, we had to have the compliance label on there. So like if you have any knowledge of cannabis, you knew what the potency was because you had like there's this much, right? So that can influence sort of how you feel about it. And we wanted to be able to blindly know, like, was it good or bad or whatever. Now, of course, that product was effective because we did have an instrument that was objectively monitoring sleep. But here, this tablet, the study is specifically looking at Crohn's. And so it's a tablet that you swallow, and the tablet understands to not release itself until it's deep in the gut. The head of our scientific board and our chief scientific officer is a seasoned pharmacologist, and he's the master who knows how to make tablets like this. And so it uses a very high load of CBG, CBD, and a very small amount of THC because you take it twice a day, so you don't actually have psychoactivity from it. And it will help ease the inflammation in the gut. We had a lab rat, so to speak, who may or may not be my co-founder, who took the medication for a year in its earliest version when we wanted to do a safety study because there was no product that existed that had that much CBG in it. The scientific board wanted to do an animal study for safety, and that was going to cost upwards of $100,000. And back to the whole cannabis economics thing, like that wasn't happening. So he was like, I'm your lab rat. You kill me. Like that's the thing. So that's not what happened though. He actually started off with blood work and colonoscopy to level set it. He had a pretty high Crohn's index score, and it took him down into a zone that shows you you're out of the zone of inflammation. You're not in active state, and it's completely changed his quality of life. And so we've worked really hard to try and get to a place where we would actually be able to do a formal trial with Crohn's patients for this product. And so we have 3 formulations in that trial that are being compared.
That's amazing. And I can only imagine that guy volunteering as tribute, the way you described that is like, hey, I'm willing to tribute myself. So what would be the time period? So for those out there who are interested in that, have faced some sort of like similar sort of challenge in their life, is there one hoping like end of 2025 they could learn more about that?
Well, yeah. So it's the recruitment window is soon to begin.
Can you be out of state for that?
No, well, no, because you have to go to a Maryland dispensary to get it, or our dispensary, I should say, to get it. But we're partnered with Practice Gastro Health that's based here and has multiple offices. And so they are the GI doctors who will do the intakes and do all of the patient assessments and then validate them based on the approved criteria. It's an IRB approved study, which means that there's a separate review board that validated this and set the protocol before anything began. And one of the groups in the trial will have placebo. So it's so that we can truly understand the quality of the results. But yeah, they would send you to the dispensary. You would pick up the allotment. You use it as prescribed. You have to return at the end, right? Because we want to understand, did you need all of it? Did you not? And the state actually created a whole protocol so that R&D products can go out a different way and that we can reclaim it, but it's not a green waste thing, so that we can accurately track the process and do it as close to like the way like a pharma trial would be done to have the validity of and the credibility of the results and ideally be able to publish our learnings. But it's people have to be on it for multiple weeks, and we're going to need a large swath of people. So we see this project as running across probably an entire year from beginning to end.
Is this something that you guys are funding? Is it health insurance helping? Or is it just strictly Curio funding all of this? That's wild.
It's us. We don't,
That's pretty dope.
But it's the core of like our game. Like we grow great flower, make awesome chews, like all this stuff. We have terpene chews, and so there's a lot of chews out there that say like indica sativa hybrid, but you look at a label, there's no terps in the results. Like we figured out how to do that. We actually have a patent pending on it. So like we'll do stuff on what we would call like the original side of things, like cannabis core products. But this sort of space where we can validate the legitimacy of this plant and like we are always looking to change quality of life, even that's just like, I want to relax after work. But this is like the game changer stuff that really gets us excited.
That's amazing. Slightly switching gears.
Yeah.
Dream smoking session, 3 people, dead or alive.
Oh my God. Okay. Tina Fey. It's probably like my same as my dinner people, I think. I'm only allowed 3?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there a 4th person?
You almost gave it.
Well, I was in my head, I was going,
maybe for you. 4.
I was going back and forth between, this is like, I'm really going to show my age. I was going back and forth between Janet and Madonna, but I was like, they're both like
Bring them both.
pop. Okay. I got to bring a guy to the mix now. Who do I want? Oh God. This is going to kill me later in the day when I think I should have said that person. John Waters.
Perfect.
Perfect.
Tell me something that is true that nobody agrees with you on.
Oh my God. I wish that so many people sitting around this office could hear you say that and hear me answer it. Because in my head, I went, everything. I think to a certain extent, how much brand matters and that you have to like live and die by it. I don't know. I'm guessing you two did not watch the Netflix series about the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders.
I did not.
I did not.
Yeah.
I'll add to the list though.
As somebody who is in a branding space, I was in awe of the woman who runs those cheerleaders because the down to the details and the rigor and the discipline and the respect that everyone around that organization has for not messing with the most minute thing, because that is their story and their legacy. And that's why they have the sort of beloved status that they do, is all rooted in that brand consistency and the discipline they have around it. I mean, it was fascinating. The anal factor of it, I thought it was fantastic. So I think that you cannot sort of like use it for convenience. You have to live and die by it. And it doesn't always mean that it's the most economical choice, but you can't just forsake it when it's convenient.
I love it. Last question. What question do you wish more people asked you?
Oh, about cannabis or anything?
First thing that came to mind.
Your questions are so hard. I hate it. Probably something that has to do with either music or food or or places I've been. Those 3 things I would think. That was not a question. I know. That was
What's
terrible.
your favorite food?
Probably ice cream.
I love ice cream.
What kind of ice cream?
Broadly, anything with a chip. We have a brand here called Taharka Brothers. They go deep on their chip flavors, which makes me very happy. But I love a chocolate chip. My longtime favorite is like a Baskin Robbins regular or mint, because I love that like pervasive shaved chip throughout with rainbow sprinkles, of course.
Can't go wrong with those. Of course. My favorite is the chipwich with my edible. That is my...
Oh, yes. A chipwich. If ever a go-to like good humor-ish thing, definitely the chipwich, 100%.
Can't go wrong. So Wendy, for our listeners, they want to get in touch. They want to learn more. Where can they find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn. They can find all about Curio Wellness online. I'm on the bio page with other leaders of the company. We're also on Instagram and Facebook. So anything on social. And if you're in Maryland, our store, I'm in the Baltimore area. So I'm usually in the Timonium store in Baltimore County. We also do have a store up in Elkton in the northern part of the state. If you're listening and you're in the South, you should go visit Sedaria, who is a Foreign Daughter franchisee in Olive Branch, Mississippi. And if you're in Missouri, no stores yet, but you can find our products in dispensaries around the state. And then you can write us an email and tell us how much you like them.
I love it. We'll link it all up in the show notes. Thanks for taking the time. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much, guys.